Hi, my name is Dharmit Thakur from Munish Engineering, and I'll be your instructor today. In this video series of FreeCAD software, which is an open source software, we are going to cover Sketcher module, and specifically, we are going to see how to apply dimensions to our sketches. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started. Here, I've created a simple file. Now, if you look closely, you can see that this profile is for a revolution of a cylinder piston. It's a piston geometry. So when you revolve this geometry, specifically only this section, you will get a piston out of that revolution. But before we go any further, what we'll have to do is we will need to create some dimensions. Now, what sort of dimensions are available to us? Dimensions are horizontal, vertical, at an angle. We can provide a constraint as in the dimension for an arc or a circle. We can also provide dimension for an angle. So without any further ado, let's get started. The first thing is you can create dimensions for a line segment, but if you look closely, you can see that this line segment only goes till the starting of this arc. What we want is the full distance from this start point till the end of it. So to give a dimension to that distance, in technical terms, what I can say is this dimension would be the radius of the piston. So what we have to do is first select this point, next select the end point here, and then we will give it a distance of, say right now it says 130 millimeters. I would like to make it 300 diameter, so it will be 150 millimeters of radius. When I click OK, you can see that the angle changed. Now the reason for that is this straight line or this line segment did not have horizontal constraint attached to it. So first let's attach a horizontal constraint to it. When we do that, you can see that the radiuses here change. Now let's go in and change a couple of radiuses. But even before that, what I would like to do is I would like to make the radiuses of the fillets are constant. So what I would like to first go in and say is that all of these radiuses of the fillets are equal. We have already seen how to add that equality sign in the previous videos. If you haven't watched those videos, I would suggest you go and watch the videos before we continue with this one. But I'm hoping and I'm assuming that you have already watched those videos. So let's just create an equality constraint between these arcs. So I'm selecting all of these arcs first. Now while I'm selecting them, I'm pressing Control key on my keyboard. Now I've got all of them selected, so I will just say equal. Now when I do that, you can see that FreeCAD successively created equal arcs everywhere. Now what I can do is then I can say that I would like to provide a radius constraint or fix the radius for this arc. Now we are deviating from the topic a bit. Normally what I do is I go from left to right for all the toolbars, but for this video I would like to deviate a bit and I would like to show how to constrain the radius of an arc. So select the first arc and then look at the fourth button. It says constraint an arc or a circle. So we'll click on that button and it gives a radius of 4.35 millimeters. Now that is a bit too high for me. I would give it a 2 millimeter radius and I'll click on OK. Now when I do that, you can see that all of these arcs have shifted to 2 millimeter radius. The next thing that needs to be done is I would like to make all of these line segments equal, because right now, as you can see, they are all of different dimensions. So how about I select these line segments and I'll make them equal. So now with that done, let's start giving dimensions. So the vertical dimension here is 10 millimeters. The vertical dimension here is 5. And the vertical dimension here is also 5. Sorry, my mistake. It's not 5, it's 10. So if you realize that you made a mistake, what you can do is you can easily double click on that dimension and you can go in and change the dimension, and FreeCAD will automatically change the restraint or the dimensions for the other line segments. So this will be 10 as well. Now this distance here is from here to here, it's 10 millimeters as well. And I have been told that this is not 10, it is 15. So this is 15 millimeters. Now by providing just very few dimensions, we were able to constrain a lot of geometry. Next is the length of the entire skirt of this piston. So I'll select the first point and the last point there. And the vertical dimension for that is 350 millimeters. Now when you do that, you will see that the dimensions here have been broken, and the reason for that is FreeCAD is not able to calculate the distances, but when you move that line segment up, it will make sure that it is fine. We know that the thickness of the skirt is 5 millimeters, so let's add that thickness first. And the thickness of this portion here is 20 millimeters. So we'll pick this point here and this point here, and we'll say it is 20 millimeters. We'll move this down here, and the radius of the fillet here is 10 millimeters, and this height is 12.5. This is 7 millimeters. And the distance between this point and this point is 25. So I can see that most of this is constrained. I cannot change the geometry here, which is a good sign. Now I would like to constrain this angle to be 45, so I select these two. The only reason I have this construction line which is horizontal is so that I can make this angle as 45. So I'll create an angle here and I'll say I need it to be 45. Now I think this 5mm is a bit too thin, so I'll make this 10. Now after that, this angle is 45 for sure, but the distance, the vertical distance here, it needs to be 10mm, but it will be a redundant constraint. And the reason for that is because it's a 45 degree and this distance here, the horizontal distance here is 10mm, it is FreeCAD is giving you a warning saying that the datum 10mm for the constraint with index 133 is invalid. It is invalid because it is already a given dimension. So we will not constrain it that way. We'll just let it go. So we have constrained nearly everything. So what did we had a look at? We had a look at horizontal distance, the vertical. We still need to have a look at the angle or the distance between any 2 points. We had a look at the constraint of an arc. We didn't look at the circle, which we'll do later on or shortly. And then we also had a look at the fix and angle distance. Next, for this, let's quickly just give it some distances. This one I would like to make it 125mm. The vertical distance I would constrain it to be 50, and I'll bring it out so that it reads clearly. Now for this circle, the circle is, I would like to give a constraint of a diameter rather than a radius, and that is 150mm diameter. When you give 150mm diameter, all of these line segments, they are constrained, so you cannot change that. If you start giving dimensions to that, it will throw an error. Now if you still want to find out what is the distance of this thing without FreeCAD throwing an error, what you can do is you can click on this button. It says toggles the toolbar or selected constraint to and from reference mode. So we just want to refer to, or we just need to find out what is that dimension. So when I click on that, and when I then say I would like to find the distance here, it gives you the distance of 75. The reason for it not throwing an error is because this is just a reference for reference only dimension. It is not used for construction purposes. What I mean by that is I can change the distance here. So instead of 150, if I make it 100, this dimension, this reference dimension will change. As you can see, it became 50mm. Now reverse is not true. If I double click on this one, what FreeCAD will do is FreeCAD will convert this reference dimension to a normal dimensioning tool, and then if I change it, then FreeCAD will try to change all of the other dimensions based on that. Now you already have given a dimension to the radius or to the diameter of this circle. If you give a conflicting dimension here, FreeCAD will throw an error. And just to prove my point, what I'll do is I'll just double click here, and it says insert the length. If I say 100mm, FreeCAD will throw an error. It says cannot set the datum because the sketch contains conflicting constraints, and which is true because what's happening is we have fixed the dimension here of the diameter, and we have originally we had this as a reference dimension, but as you can see, it changed color from blue to red. It means that this is now a normal dimension, not a reference dimension. So to change it back to a reference dimension, you click on this again, and then it swaps it back to a reference dimension. Conversely, if you want to do it in the reverse way, you can change this to a reference dimension and then change this back to a normal dimension, and now I will be able to change this dimension and FreeCAD will not throw an error, and it will give, or it will calculate the radius or the diameter of this circle, and that it will just show it out because this now is your reference dimension. So if you'd like to just find out without FreeCAD throwing an error what is the dimension of a circle or of a particular line segment which is constrained in other ways, just make it as a reference dimension. Next, I can find out the distances between these 2 points by say 150 mil, and I can also give a radius to this one and not the diameter. I would like to constrain radius, and let's say I want 25 millimeters of radius. Now as you can see, this is constraint in a way, but say suppose I don't want to constrain it that way. So let's make this as a reference dimension and this as a reference dimension. The dimension I'm given is between the tangent of this arc and tangent of this arc. Now there is no easy way to come up with the tangents of or the dimension of the tangents of these two arcs. You can calculate back saying, say the dimension of this tangent to tangent was 200 millimeters and the radius of this arc was 25. So you can back calculate it that if this was 200 tangent to tangent minus 25 on this side, minus 25 on the left hand side, so the distance between these 2 points would be 150. Now if you don't want to do it that way, there is another way of getting, or there is another way of adding dimension to the tangents of these 2 points. Now if you go straight and select these two and say I would like to get a horizontal dimension, FreeCAD will throw an error. FreeCAD says select exactly one line or up to 2 points from the sketch. So horizontal or vertical dimension can be only given to either 2 points or a straight line or a line segment. Now what do we do here? The other thing that can be done here is, first let's change this to construction mode. We will click on a point here and then we'll do something similar on this side. Now let's make this line and this arc as tangents. So we'll make this tangent and let's make this and this tangent. Okay, now I can go and select this point and then say I would like to find out the dimension, and it says it is 200.08. If I make this exactly 200, this becomes 150 and this becomes 25. Just to prove the point again, let's make it 200, and FreeCAD FreeCAD just did not calculate it automatically. So to change it, how about I change this dimension from a reference to a normal dimension and make this 25. When you make this 25, this dimension changes to 150 because geometrically that makes sense, or mathematically that makes sense. So that's how you can create horizontal, a vertical, a dimension at an angle, which we did see in this. And then we had a look at 2 ways of constraining an arc or a circle. It is either by radius or by diameter. We also saw how to fix an angle of a line or an angle between 2 lines. Now the other thing, or the last thing to be seen, is what is this lock dimension? It says create a lock constraint on the selected item. If I want to fix the dimension of this endpoint, and if I click on the lock, what FreeCAD does is FreeCAD gives you the dimension of this point from the origin. Now if I want to shift it to 175 millimeters in horizontal or minus 175 millimeters, and this one if I want to make it minus 50, I can change the dimensions like this. Now if I keep on doing it that way, say for this point, let's just fix the dimension and let's, oh, not that one, this one, let's make it minus 180 and this one as minus 190, and let's fix this point, let's make it minus 150 here this dimension, let's make it -500. Just so that it is evenly placed. So that's how you can create dimensions, or you can give dimensions to a line segment between 2 points, which are horizontal, which are vertical, which are at an angle. You can give a radius to a circle or an arc. You can give a diameter to a circle. You can give an angle to a line segment, or to two different line segments that intersect each other, or even if they don't intersect each other but they are at an angle, you can give them an angle. And you can also give a tangent dimension to a slot, which we saw here in this scenario. So that's how you use dimension tool in Sketcher module or Sketcher Workbench of FreeCAD. I'll see you next time, where we'll learn all the more exciting things of FreeCAD. Till that time, thank you.